everyone, to our session on how Adobe modernized their billing APIs with SAP on AWS. Adobe and AWS have put in a lot of effort to prepare this session. Hope you enjoy it. I am Sudhendu Pandey. I'm a principal sales specialist with AWS. I've been here for 2 years with AWS. Before that, I was at SAP. Some of you might have met me in the past for about 16 years. We have the honor of having Ram and Matt join us today from Adobe to tell their story. And to introduce them, Matt is the Senior Director of Platform Services and Commerce at Adobe. With about 25 years of experience, Matt brings a lot of skills and a lot of experience to Adobe. And he has invested his time in running ERP systems, including SAP and infrastructure-related projects. Welcome, Matt. And over to Ram. Ram is the Director of Engineering COE and Enterprise Architecture at Adobe. He also has about 20 years of experience building products, running projects, including cloud-native architectures that he has designed. And both of them are an integral part of this project that we're going to talk about today with you. We'll be taking questions towards the end of the session. So hope we answer most of your questions through our conversation. And if anything else is left out, we'll be happy to take questions towards the end. So coming to the agenda for today real quick, 3 things that we want to get out of today's conversation is what were the challenges Adobe saw in their approach with the on-prem application deployment? How did they start thinking about the UBS or the Universal Billing Solution project? And how did they select options? How did they go about making the choices? And then finally, what were the lessons learned and the benefits that they derived from the project? So that, in essence, is the 3-point agenda here. And from what Matt and Ram have told me, if we do this really, really well today, we'll be out of here by 11 p.m. You all good with that? All right. So with that, let me turn to you, Matt, to talk a little bit about Adobe as a company. But just a show of hands, who has used Adobe products in their personal and professional lives so far? Mind you, Adobe PDF is included in that. All right, so almost everyone in the room has used Adobe products, so we know how important Adobe is to our personal and professional lives. At least I, for sure, cannot imagine a day I do not have or have not used an Adobe product personally or professionally. So let's talk about Adobe as a company, Matt.
Great. Good afternoon, everyone. So Adobe, I think folks are fairly familiar with it. We've made our transition from that PDF and Photoshop, there it goes, PDF and Photoshop world to now a SaaS architecture-based company. And in doing so, we've restructured our product line. So when you think of Adobe now, there's actually 3 major product segments, divisions that we look to have. It's our Creative Cloud, which most folks know as Photoshop and the video editing and the components for creative professionals in making content for the world. Our other part is Document Cloud. That's PDF, our Sign business, et cetera, that runs a lot of the enterprise business. And then our Experience Cloud, which focuses on marketing, customer experience, web analytics, and a lot of components around that. And within that, Adobe's expanded rapidly over the years. I think when I started 15 years ago, it was about 10,000 people. We're at 26,000 plus now. And we're about to celebrate our 40th anniversary, which just feels remarkable. And just, you know, the company just truly enjoys all the things that it's changed and accomplished over the years. And it's been an exciting run recently. And lastly, what I'd say is Adobe, beyond all the technology and how we try to help the creatives in the industry, there is a huge focus on community, on environment, and the culture within the company really highlights that. We do a lot with the community, we do a lot with charity, and it's just been a phenomenal place to work and be a part of for the last decade plus.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing, Matt. I've also heard a lot about how Adobe has transformed into a cloud or a SaaS company that you cued us on initially. And a lot of customers that I meet with are also curious about how Adobe has accomplished that mission. So Give us a little bit on that as well, Matt.
Yeah, so again, going back to say the original Photoshop or PDF days, we used to be a pick, pack, ship CD, as actual physical media, and we had plants press it, send it out, and that, was the business model for a long time. And as an SAP shop, we've been running SAP since the mid-90s, and all of the business processes and everything surrounding that were based on that more traditional merchandise delivery model. Single time, single payment, kind of done. Around '08, with the recession and everything else that hit, most of us remember as such fun times, we realized we had to pivot as a company, both strategically and just to, with the way the economy and the industry was moving. And so we had a fundamental shift to become a SaaS organization, and it was truly fundamental. We were requested to pivot both not in just the technology, but in our mindset, in our culture, in the entire way we looked at how we were approaching our customers and the industry and all components of it. And throughout all that, it wasn't just a product change. It wasn't just like, okay, hey, we've lifted Photoshop and it's now cloud-based, but it was a fundamental change of the products. It was a fundamental change of the back office processes. Every way we did business and recognized the business and handled the front end and back end operations had to change as well. And right down to our customer engagement, our support, financial reporting, we reinvented all of it. And I'll say to this day, it's still a transformation in progress. There was within the product engineering and the back office components, there was some very heavily focused years where we moved fast and took some chances to make that transition. But even to today, new business models, new opportunities, new products, and that transformation is still going. Within the billing space that we're talking about today, you can think of it, CD, one-time purchase, you buy it, you're done, you get a single invoice, receipt. That was it. Offline, maybe you got the email and or even a physical piece of paper back in the day. Now we're looking at real-time, always-on customer engagement. That billing, we have multiple business models. You have month-to-month, you have annual, you have one-time, you have various recurrings, you have metering. There's all sorts of components. And that invoice is constantly changing and needs to be available, as you all expect, to look at it on your phone and see it, hey, what's going on last week, last month, what do I want to change? Pricing models, things change constantly on that, from, hey, this week we're running a special, as opposed to it just be a one-time position. So as we made that transition, everything about the way we did business had to pivot and had to adapt to a completely different model from the way we had been doing business. It was a big change.
Right, yeah, thank you for sharing that, Matt. So let's also start discussing what challenges you saw in terms of technology or back office solutions that you were using with the CD shipping model versus what you needed to do in the cloud world, and how did you start thinking about that change?
Yeah, so the original model, as most of you know, if you have a legacy ERP system, SAP, say an ECC ABAP stack, monolithic architecture, probably on-prem, might have a failover region, but your approach for high availability is probably single zone with a failover server. There's ways to get a little more advanced, obviously, but back when it was just CDs, that was it. Single stack, you could have outages, downtimes, you could do the maintenance on it. And when we did that transition to a SaaS architecture, the customer expectation changed, as well as all the behaviors, transactions, everything that came with those customers. So from selling a few 100,000 CDs at a time, one and done, we're now at millions and millions of transactions a day. Real time, with the expectation that the services is always available, the data is always ready, and you can handle that scale. The legacy SAP systems were never designed for that, as you guys probably well know. Scaling up was a challenge. Performance was a challenge. Availability, you could never achieve the 4 to 5 nines that you need with a SaaS solution with an on-prem legacy ERP. And lastly, as I mentioned, SAP being run since the mid-90s, we had that same spaghetti set of code and customizations and add-ons and changes built up over years. On top of that, you take that base and completely fundamentally change it to a different business model, and the code and the integrations and the touch point, it becomes a bit of a spaghetti mess. And so the challenges that we were facing for all this was exactly that. It was performance, it was scale, it was availability, it was the tight coupling and the hard, more brittle code structures and integration that we had with all of our partner engineering services. And we knew we had to do something drastically different to grow as a company and hit the next set of billions of dollars from revenue and customer experience.
So would it be fair to say performance, integration, and availability were the three metrics that you were measuring your customer experience against? And you were using them to drive better customer experience?
Yes, definitely from a customer experience standpoint. And as we'll get to a little bit later, but there are some internal metrics as well as optimization, agility, innovation that we as a technology organization took advantage of as well. But definitely customer focus was the primary driver motivation, and that availability, that performance is just key. You have to scale.
Right. So let's dive a little bit deeper into the legacy architecture that you have already hinted us on and understand that a little better, what workarounds you put in place and how that was working.
Yeah, thank you. So if you look at our legacy architecture, on the right-hand side, you see our ECC on-prem infrastructure. We have a primary data center that is in San Jose, and we have a primary in Oregon, secondary in San Jose. As we go through the transition, a lot of the clients have gone into a cloud-native architecture, whether it's customer support or pricing or Adobe.com. They all gravitate towards cloud. And a lot of the cloud services we hosted on US East, there's a lot of latency between the geographies. That actually adds up, right? So when we talk about APIs, we want to reduce the API response times. So we want to reduce the geographic separation. Then we also have a highly coupled architecture where we have the billing data and the financial data are sitting in the same system. So if you're running a big billing batch job, or if you're doing like a year-end or quarter-end financial reconciliation, it actually has an impact on your API response times. So we need to separate that out. And lastly, we talked about the integration challenges too, is there is no direct API that you can call into an SAP system to say, give me a response back. You have to go through another middleware that orchestrates for you. And that also adds to your API response time. The other option we also talked about is availability. When SAP goes down for maintenance, we have to go through a lot of technical challenges behind the scene to stand up a read-only instance where we queue up all the billing changes and then resync it back when the systems come up. So it is a challenge operationally, it is a challenge from an integration perspective. So those were the main factors that led us to say how we can rethink about billing.
Right. Thank you, Ram, for helping us understand the architectural challenges. Let's start transitioning to how you started envisioning the future state process flow, or how you would solve for these availability, performance, and integration challenges, and help us understand that a little bit.
Sure. So when we think about, again, billing, who needs billing data, right? So when a customer is in Adobe.com trying to add a seat or trying to remove a seat or trying to make a change in between a month, what is my proration for that month? So all of this needs billing data. So we have a lot of billing clients. And what has happened over the years is our billing APIs have become complex, and the clients needs to know, oh, this is a consumer who's trying to make a change to a month-to-month plan, or whether it's a small, medium business trying to make a change plan to their yearly commitment. So our billing APIs have that knowledge baked into that. What we did is we wanted to create a facade first of all. We want to create a billing facade that abstracts the complexity, whether it's SD-based billing or hybrid billing or any other implementation of billing custom logic to their clients. So they just have simple APIs that they can call into, and then everything is abstracted behind this. And we also wanted to have a highly decoupled architecture where these batch jobs and repeated increase in workloads have no impact or read API latencies. The last point is when we move the data, we have a huge amount. Our SAP footprint is about 70 terabytes. So if you want to make the billing data available to the clients or in the cloud, we don't want to take all the 70 terabytes and just replicate everything. We want to have a common data model where you can reduce the footprint from, say, 200 tables to, say, we narrowed down to 30 tables that you can replicate into the cloud, and then have a canonical data model or a common data model from which you can expose your APIs.
Right. Yeah, we'll come back to those concepts a little bit later as well in this presentation. But let's also start talking about, thinking about the value or the benefits you envision with this change in the process flow and the change in the design of your architecture. And let's talk about that also.
Sure. So if you look at a billing platform, there is disproportional amounts of reads versus writes. So the number of reads, we have about 7 million read calls that happens to our platform every single day. And then the number of writes, people actually making a change to their billing or like new plans coming in, it's about 2 million. So we had to like prioritize where we want to attack. We can't solve everything at day one. So we prioritized, let's go after reads and bring more SLA into that. So as we went through this journey, our read API latency went from 1.5 seconds to less than 100 milliseconds. That's a huge impact to the workflows. If you are sitting in with a shopping cart, we can actually make changes and see it in almost real time, what that change means. We are able to also improve our SLA from 3 nines, from an on-prem world to like 4 nines, because we are deployed in multi-AZs and we have failover that happens automatically, no manual intervention. The other thing is we went from 37 APIs. So our clients, think about if you're a client of a billing API, whether it's customer support or like e-commerce side or partner portals, you have to know about 37 different APIs. And we actually are able to shrink that into 2 APIs. They just need to operate only on those 2 API spaces.
Let's keep that number in mind, from 2 seconds response time at the API down to less than 100 milliseconds. And that's at the front end, at the customer or the consumer level. That can mean a big difference between your experience as a customer. We'll revisit that as we move along. So one of the important things that I am personally interested, and I think the audience in the room as well, is how did you start thinking about the options you had to design this new system, new architecture, and what choices did you make? What did you discard versus what did you keep?
Sure. So the options are like, we can either completely break down the monolith, go decompose every single domain, right, and then start from scratch, do the big migration of data from the SAP landscape into the microservices architecture, or can we actually leverage the existing investments we have? So we actually chose the second option, where we wanted to leverage the investments that we have. We gain incredible benefits by keeping our billing and finance data coupled together. So if we choose the first real microservices-based architecture, you will move into an eventual consistency architecture where billing data has to be reconciled with the financial data, and you cannot do real-time reporting. So that was a major factor for us. We want to do real-time financial reporting. So having that tight integration between billing and finance and leveraging real-time reporting was very important for us. And that also gives us better experience internally, right? So if you are able to pull up your financial records, you're able to do it in real time. You don't have to wait for like 10 different events to trigger, and then you have to reconcile that. So we went with the latter option, using a combination of microservices and leveraging SAP implementation.
Right. I have picked up some lessons there that don't just start disrupting what you have. Leveraging existing investments and creating something brand new that doesn't exist is more valuable than trying to reinvent the wheel. So that's my takeaway from this conversation. Let's move slowly into the target architecture and start envisioning and visualizing what that looks like compared to what we saw in the legacy or the on-prem architecture style.
Yeah. So the target architecture, if you look at the ECC, we still take the read traffic from ordering and from payments through the ECC route, and that goes through our on-prem route. On the Amazon side, we replicate the data from ECC, selective tables, using the SLT replication. And we can replicate the data in under 60 microseconds from ECC to the S4 HANA database, HANA database in the cloud in 2 regions. Once the data is replicated to, say, US East A, we use HANA-DB replication, not the SLT replication, to replicate to a second AZ for a highly available architecture. And then we provide a set of APIs, Java classes, container-based APIs, that sits on top of the HANA-DB and provides the response for other billing clients just for read operations, pricing, chat, entitlements, subscriptions. So all of those clients who need the billing data can directly call into our API gateway in the US East.
In that data replication, leveraging SLT, by using SAP's technology, the data consistency and the data integrity is just far better than an event-driven sort of self-built solution of migrating that data. So we're trying to leverage, for multiple reasons, compliance as well, just, when you have to, given this is financials with the auditors, but having that level of data integrity and trusting in that, both to get the speed and the trust and the veracity of the data getting across.
Right.
And that was a huge component of why we did go the SLT HANA route and leverage native SAP to SAP technologies.
Yeah, I can relate to that because at some point in my life I was doing some hands-on on SLT and absolutely loved that product. So turning back to you, Matt, let's also help us understand where are you taking the billing solution in the future?
Yeah, so there's a couple parts of this. So what we've done now is foundationally the service is up. We've vetted the technology, we've got the core capabilities in place, and the initial production usage is going. But there's a number of pieces here that, as Ram mentioned, we're consolidating 37 APIs into 2. We're trying to do different data models that allow us to have more flexibility going forward. And as such, as anything, there's a phase 1 rollout, get that base technology up and running, and then we're going to add capabilities over time. With that, though, is the partner engineering teams that we have to bring on board. And the way they use those APIs, there's some additional capabilities and some additional components that they need in this service. So the way we've structured it is we don't want to be on this migration journey forever. And as we'll talk about with S4 coming down the road, we have to get this done sooner rather than later. So we laid out a set of features based on those partner engineering teams, their needs, as well as a balance of risk in terms of what capabilities, what volumes, what scale would come when. And we laid out a roadmap that would mix onboarding, new capabilities, and functional business impact with a little innovation thrown in over the next year. But the intention is to do a very rapid rollout over the next 4 quarters so that we're not living in the migration neverland forever and having 2 existing systems plus the new system running in parallel. We're trying to get through this journey in a rapid approach.
Great, awesome. Let's go beyond technology-specific decisions. There's a very important aspect of change management, upskilling, cross-skilling, and how do you prepare the team to be ready for that change? And there are some important leadership lessons that I have learned talking to you in the past. Let's also help us understand what were those considerations.
Yeah, and it really is much more than just the technology. The technology is some of the fun innovation, the pieces of new AWS services, SAP services, creating, building. That's always the fun part, and people love doing that. But we had to pivot the organization as well. And if you think back, and I imagine a lot of you folks have the same situation, you've got SAP veterans, BSAs, ABAP developers, et cetera, that are very depth of knowledge in SAP and in a ERP or monolithic architecture. They've probably been doing it most of their career. This is a hybrid. This is a combination of needing those skill sets and that legacy understanding, but merging it with all the new technologies of the cloud. And we wanted to do this as a chance to motivate and grow the team and really help them expand their careers and just want to come in and be part of that innovation. So we took a couple of different approaches. Beyond just that technology, on the people side, we did a mix. We did brand new hiring around Java skill sets, cloud skill sets, leveraged a lot of NCGs, new college grads, get a lot of that young talent in the industry in that have just coming out of that understanding, and mixing that with some senior Java talent that we had in-house or consulting temps that we would onboard, and then take our existing team, that ABAP, that SAP development, BSA knowledge, and we had those folks go through training. We did a lot of AWS cloud training. We did a lot of just general data modeling and cloud features, as well as some understanding of Java for the ABAP and BSAs, so that we could bring the whole team along on the ride. It was a full upskill along with some new blood into the architecture, and it just really, really worked well. The team was motivated, they were highly engaged, and they really enjoyed doing the rollout. Beyond that as well, I'll say you have the technology foundation, you have the people foundation. What we also took the opportunity was to do some of the process advancement as well. So right off the bat, we leveraged AWS, the well-architected framework and reviews, as well as SAP's framework and reviews. So get some best practice, get some forward thinking so that we were actually looking to where we wanted to land or where the new capabilities were going to land rather than just replicating what we had. And then as well, because we added a Java component and some of the cloud capabilities, we took a very, very core mindset focus on quality by design and ensured from day one that on the operational and QA side of the house, we were basically 100% engaged. So all test cases, all test data automated. We had separate libraries and repositories of test data that we could replicate into these environments, basically refresh, so that everything could be systematically run in advance before any release. In doing that, we were able to actually put a CI/CD pipeline over the top of a legacy SAP environment and run all of those automations, all of those playbooks, press of a button. So before it even makes it to our stage environments, all the new code, all those releases are being vetted before they get there. And if that doesn't pass the automated test, it doesn't move forward. So we really try to say, hey, we've got a fresh start here. Let's do it with the people, let's do it with the technology, let's do it with the process, and ensure we have, just the best going forward. And to be honest, we had no choice because this is truly customer facing, it's revenue impacting, it's financial and reporting and compliance impacting. We cannot disrupt the business, and it would be highly visible if anything went sideways with these systems while we're doing this. So we're trying to ensure end-to-end both the teams and the technology from the ground up.
Yeah, and one fact that I discovered working with Matt and Ram during this project was Adobe did this whole project with in-house resources. They did not work with a partner at all. And that made me an even bigger fan of Adobe as a superior engineering organization. And that the fact that you use the opportunity for change as an opportunity for growth versus being skeptical for a really, really long time that I see as a pattern in a lot of my customers is also a commendable fact in this whole story. So for someone trying to build a business case for a similar project, or maybe even going to S/4HANA from ECC, going to the cloud, the question is, what business benefits did you consider or put into your case that we can learn from?
Yeah, so some obviously we've talked about, the immediate impact on the customer experience, the scale, the availability, the performance, all of that sort of, it kind of goes without saying in the modern SaaS architecture, but when you apply that to a traditional SAP ERP environment, that is not something that you normally get out of the box. So making that transition and keeping the customer impact from being felt, huge business benefit, and that's straight in terms of revenue, customer satisfaction, et cetera. But going back to what I was just talking about with some of the team, being able to change the operations, the process, the skill sets, we got a lot of internal advancement too. We got a lot of agility and efficiency. We got releases now that we can roll out, a couple of times a week rather than a planned maintenance window with transports, and somebody's working in a downtime. So this is moving right through, and our pace of roadmap delivery and our flexibility, the agility that it came with, was a huge benefit as well. Beyond that, and I'd say going back a little bit to the technology, what Ram described with the canonical data models, the unified APIs, the amount of complexity reduced in the environment has greatly simplified all the handshakes we have with our partner environments. And billing, these type of systems tend to be center of the universe. So entitlements, provisioning, finance, everybody has a handshake through these systems. It's central to so many flows. In the end-to-end testing, the coordination, the release alignments, the even something as simple as a data object change has far-reaching ramifications with all those partner orgs. Getting rid of those 30 years of complexity and spaghetti code and everything that's been built in over time, and now simplifying that, we've allowed all those partner organizations to basically decouple. So a release management org does not now have to get 1,000 people involved. Even in end-to-end testing with the automation, we don't need to engage their QA teams because we're able to run their test suite against ours before we even launch. So that simplicity has just, again, roadmap, agility, speed has been a huge benefit. The last one too, and it's actually important now for a lot of us making the S4 journey. This had to happen in order for us to be able to make that transition to S4. Both in terms of downtime and availability, that S4 migration and cutover has significant business downtime impacts, so we had to have this abstraction in place. But then the new data models, the new table structures, everything that was going to change because of S4, we had to basically make that transparent to all those partner engineering teams. And this was our way of having that abstraction and getting that ability to be flexible and move at our own pace, and they can move at their pace. So traditional business benefits, scale, performance, but a lot on the engineering side of the house on how you deliver roadmaps for the organization.
Wow. So challenges became opportunities, and you leveraged them to create a path for the future as a foundation. Love it. What about some of the lessons learned that people in the room can take away, or those listening to the recording and the video can take away?
Yeah, so I can take that. So one of the lessons we talked about in the beginning is don't be afraid of the monolith, right? So everybody says there's a trend in the industry, say everything has to be a microservice. You got to break down every single thing to like a single domain, have a microservice, have a database behind it. So even though that is the trend, SAP has invested 20 years of engineering into it. There is a reason why SAP exists in the market, right? And don't build commodity capabilities. Billing is not a differentiating factor. If billing is not a differentiating factor for your business, don't build billing microservices and do the heavy lifting yourself, right? Configuration over code. Try to configure, don't write a lot of code. So SAP allows you to do it. And we went down this path of embracing monolith as well as going and adapting cloud native services and enabling faster performance. The other lessons we learned is think about your high availability and DR strategy ahead of time. These are not afterthoughts, and if they are afterthoughts, it's very hard to change. And we work very closely with AWS. They've helped us come up with a really great high availability architecture. Even though we run in one region, we have a plan to have a DR location in another region. So think about that ahead of time. And the last one I would say is think about your data migration strategy too. So when you test something in a staging environment or in a developer environment with 1 million records or 10 million records is very different when you move to a production environment with billions of rows. So expect some surprises in the data migration journey. Expect some surprises when you actually roll it out for the first time in production. Mm-hmm. There will be some hiccups, right? So in our case, everything worked great in a local region. Everything was fine. And when we went to production, the initial performance was like not what we expected. And we thought, did we actually architected this wrong? And then we went and looked at it and we said, maybe there's one query that's not working correctly. We tweaked it, and then we started seeing less than 100 microsecond latencies, right? So expect some challenges along the way, expect some surprises, but those shouldn't stop you from taking the journey.
Right. So going back to the mention of the 2-second to 100 millisecond reduction in latency and connecting it back to how the customer experience was affected by that, and then connecting the dots back to how billing is always considered a back office function, not really strategic to the business. But because of this abstraction layer in AWS that Adobe built, they started creating that differentiated user experience using billing as a foundation as delivered by SAP, plus putting their own innovation in terms of those APIs on top to create that abstraction and separation from the future state. If you swap out ECC for S4 tomorrow, that's not going to change materially much in the abstraction layer and above. So let's start talking about the comparison between how things are going to change when you start looking at S4 and how people in the room and ones listening to this session later on can learn from that.
Sure. So if you see the current state, that's what we described so far, right? So you have your clients, they go through our UBS services, right? There's a set of APIs there, and there's a HANA DB there, and then the data is replicated from ECC into the UBS service. When we move to S4, the top layer remains constant. All we have to do is work on the UBS replication layer and change to S4 database, whether it's a greenfield migration or a brownfield migration. We have to tweak some parameters in the UBS services and the tables that get replicated from S4 instead of tables that's going to get replicated from ECC. And that change will be like 100% transparent to all of our clients, which is huge, whether it's if you're running two systems in parallel or doing like one-shot migration to S4HANA, having that flexibility is a big advantage for you in your S4 migration. And having this abstraction layer helps in that.
The one other thing I would call out on that too, with that S4 journey, the downtime that comes with that migration of the data, this way you obviously have the availability solved for the customer impact, so you can have the extended downtime. But and I was thinking about this after, and one of the lessons learned, put some thought into which of your processes are truly read and which ones have a write component update. What we found when we did that analysis was we were 95-ish% reads. And so this was a very clean solution for that. But there was a 5% or so opportunity of writes where we're getting real-time updates back from the customer. We have ways of queuing that and sort of, I don't want to say faking out the customer, but you're basically representing back their change to them and holding it for your update. But what we're looking at is the capability of either applying those writes or pulling them out. Mm-hmm. But just you have to think of that through S4 as it's not just the technology footprint, but also your processes, and give some thought to your read versus your write flows and some of the nuance within the greater architecture.
Right. Let's also talk about one final time about what's the future of the SAP in terms of roadmap at Adobe.
And again, you kind of get the sense of it from the conversation we had. We have to get everybody onto this before our S4 migration, which is scheduled in 2024. So we got about a year to get everything on this side in place before we roll into that S4 transition. We're obviously doing a lot of pre-work on S4 now, but this has to be a differentiating factor before. So migrations have to complete. As I mentioned, the write operations need to be resolved, but that's a smaller footprint. We have a couple of different approaches, some leveraging UBS as part of it, and some leveraging just the way we've structured the workflows with our partner organizations and where we can append some of that data or hold it in advance. So again, a few different strategies at play there. And then that last, when we do that migration to S4, the table structures change, some of the billing process flows, some of the business flows will change, and we'll adapt those change management, those business transformations that the operations teams and the financial teams want to do and incorporate that into this flow. But we'll have the flexibility in the API and data structures that'll be far simpler than trying to tweak all the legacy environments that we had previous. So it's basically being able to leverage that innovation and move much faster with it than we would have been able to do with a historical monolith.
Right. Awesome. Thanks a lot for sharing your journey and the lessons learned. We, of course, will have some Q&A at the end. But
Sure.
Just a show of hands before I go to the next section. How many of you are thinking of using cloud, already using cloud in some shape or form for your SAP requirements? All right. So quite a few of you. All right. It's interesting because the next section might be relevant to you if you've not already seen it. This is about how SAP workloads or use cases are enabled by AWS, what has been our legacy doing it. So this year marks the 14 years of supporting SAP workloads in AWS, starting in early 2007 when Hasso Plattner's team observed a keynote from Werner Vogels, our CTO, and started thinking about how can they become more agile for test and dev use cases with AWS, launching new workloads out there at the click of a button versus waiting for like an 8-week procurement cycle, if you will. And that translated into us working with SAP collaboratively, certifying instances for SAP-specific requirements, going and certifying HANA instances in the future, and then continuing to innovate till date. I mean, if you've been noticing, 2 days ago we announced the R7 instances with Intel Sapphire Rapids chipset. That's the first in the industry to come out with that. And we'll continue to innovate on that product line as we go along. We have released progressively larger instance sizes, as you can see, from 6 to 12 to 18 to 24 right now. And as our customers push boundaries of that solution, we continue to think about other innovative solutions as well. Automation has been the theme for the last 3 to 4 years, where we have worked with customers who are asking for eliminating a lot of the undifferentiated heavy lifting from SAP operations to say, can I deploy an SAP instance in less than 2 hours? Yes, you can on AWS. Can I automate the production refresh into a non-production environment to do some testing? Yes, you can. Can you automate through a DevSecOps cycle, as Matt was referring to, a CI/CD pipeline to automate the release of new features and configuration to the SAP landscape? That's also possible. So a lot of innovation has been done by us at the infrastructure level that can eliminate a lot of the manual effort for you. And now we're also evolving into the best practices around well-architected framework. There's an SAP lens for it now, SAP-specific best practices for deploying workloads in the cloud that Adobe leveraged. And we'll come to that as well later on. So a lot of good content coming out, products coming out, services coming out, capabilities continuously innovating on your behalf to give you what it needs to run SAP flawlessly and at the best price-performance ratio that you can imagine in the industry. And that's the reason why more than 7,000 customers now trust AWS to run their SAP workloads across industries, as you can see. SAP themselves are one of our largest customers across the world, and they are launching a lot of their services, including BTP, Business Transformation Platform, Business Technology Platform, is running on AWS and other hyperscalers as well. But we give the most breadth and depth of services when it comes to BTP, if you were to compare. Analysts are agreeing with us. It's not just our opinion that we are leading the market. Gartner, for the 12th year in a row, has ranked us as the leader in cloud information platform services, infrastructure platform services. And then ISG, the other analyst that focuses on SAP HANA-specific infrastructure services capabilities, has also ranked AWS consistently for 5 straight years. Ever since they started this analysis, we have led the market and continue to do so ahead of all other providers. Something new that came out, if you have already gotten the email from our marketing team, the ABAP SDK for AWS was launched last week. That allows you to simplify the integration of your SAP data using this SDK with the AWS cloud services. So you can mix and match HANA storage with S3, for example. You can do workflows across SAP and AWS services using step functions, Lambda, whatever you have in mind. combine microservices and standard SAP capabilities, just more easier than trying to do point-to-point integration between one process step and the next. Something more in terms of, this is not an exhaustive list, by the way. What is not there is what I just mentioned, the R7 instance types that have been released with Sapphire Rapids. That is there, but the theme has more been on enabling what is in demand. 90% of the innovation Amazon or AWS do is demanded by customers. Rest 10% comes from our interpretation of your needs that may have been unexpressed. So these are all coming from how customers are asking us to innovate on their behalf, and our engineering is putting their heads together to come up with these innovations. Whether it's automation, whether it's infrastructure, core infrastructure, whether it's migration. So Migration Hub Orchestrator has allowed now us to create standard templates for A to Z steps, what it takes from migrating from on-prem to the cloud, put that in a workflow, in a process flow, and you can execute them as a checklist and make sure you're not missing anything. You can automate those steps and eliminate a lot of the manual guesswork, a lot of the documentation you had to do in the past is all part of the MHO offering. So really cool one if you have a project in mind to do migration to the cloud. CloudWatch Application Insights for both the application layer, the NetWeaver stack, as well as the HANA database. You can all visualize that in one. It's all out of the box. You just have to connect your CloudWatch Insights to the workloads running in AWS, and you can start observing CPU, memory, network, compute. Any kind of abnormal observations will be immediately published. You can send a notification to your phone, to your email, to anyone who needs to take action on that, so they can quickly diagnose what the root cause of that issue was and get to the solution faster. So that's the intent behind automating that. We talked about the well-architected framework. We just added the sixth pillar of sustainability. How can we compare the traditional ways of running SAP on-prem to how it is more sustainable to run it on the cloud because of economies of scale, because of the ability to bring systems up and down at will, shut them on the weekends if you're not testing on the weekend, for example. And we did implement the reliability pillar, for example, for Adobe's UBS project. Ram, you want to give us a few pointers on that?
Yeah, sure. So when we did the first initial architecture layout for UBS, we actually went through the SAP lens for well-architected framework, and then we were able to tweak a couple of parameters for our HA implementation, and we also laid the foundation for our multi-region deployments. And we are also planning in the next, as we go through our roadmap, one of the steps in the roadmap is to go through the other pillars, whether it's cost optimization or reliability. All of those pillars, we will go through one by one. It's a lot to do in like one cycle. So don't try to do the well-architected framework like in one go. It takes a lot of commitment from you and also from AWS. Just do it like one pillar at a time, and then over a period of time, you definitely increase your maturity of the platform over a period of time.
SAP is a mission-critical workload. We will not leave anything unsaid or undone when it comes to well-architecting it. So it's a comprehensive framework is what you mean, right?
Yes.
All right, that brings us almost to the end. QR codes for you to scan and follow up on any other action items that you have in mind. We are happy to connect with you. You can always connect with me on LinkedIn if you like, and I'm happy to support your projects in any way, shape, or form. We have discovery workshops. We have, as Ram said, well-architected framework reviews. If you already have a workload running in AWS, we are happy to come back and do reviews with you and help you identify opportunities for improvement, whether it's performance or cost or anything else that you have in mind. We are happy to work with you. And then we have a dedicated professional services team as well. That, by the way, is another of our unique offerings. We have our own teams working with you to do these migrations and give you best practices on how to run SAP well in the cloud. And we have migration acceleration program that can come in handy to provide incentives to accelerate your migration programs and absorb some of the double bubble in terms of running two workloads simultaneously as you do the migration to the cloud. And with that, I will bring us to a close. I'm really thankful.